standstill. Now, among those flight cancellations, Cathay Pacific, more than 140 flights in and out of the city canceled today, about a dozen for tomorrow. You have Hong Kong Airlines canceling about 30, and Hong Kong Express also canceling 3 scheduled flights and 1 chartered flight. Now, I'm standing in front of the Cathay Pacific check-in counter. Earlier, this was packed with passengers who were attempting to check in for the flights, perhaps that were still resuming operations. We also saw passengers seeking out staff to find out more detail about their flights that were canceled. So that has since been, since we got here early this morning. But alongside the disruptions to aviation, we're also seeing disruptions to train networks across the island, Kowloon and New Territories. We're having delays, and we've had suspensions at several key stations like Fortress Hill as part of attempts by strike organizers to prevent folks from making it to work on time in central business districts across the city. Guys.
Sharon, we've seen a lot of criticism from Chinese state media, with Xinhua saying this unrest can't continue, talking about the ugly forces at work here challenging central authority. But what realistically can Beijing actually do?
Yeah, so right now, it looks like all Beijing can do is really offer verbal support. It's really using the local media, both in Beijing and also where it can reach in Hong Kong, to paint the forces as extremist, as violent, as something that needs to be cracked down on, and it's shown its support for the police. And there was another commentary this morning on the front page of the People's Daily saying that the priority for Hong Kong right now should be to resolutely support the police about military intervention, or whether it will send any help into Hong Kong. I mean, that remains to be seen. It would really be an extreme scenario for that to happen, and only if Hong Kong requests the help would it legally be allowed to do so.
And Sophie, David mentioned earlier, we're expecting that presser from Carrie Lam very shortly. What are we expecting there?
When it comes to Carrie Lam's first public appearance in 2 weeks, we're going to be looking for signals as to how the government is hoping to address the demands of the protesters, how they're looking to address the escalation in tensions, because there have been more animosity between protesters and police. As we saw over the weekend, 44 protesters were arrested by police over the protests on August 4th and August 5th. And this is on top of the arrest that we saw just last week, 49 arrests, 44 of whom were charged with colonial-era anti-right statute rulings, which could see a prison term of up to 10 years. And of the arrests that were made this weekend, they were arrested related to offenses including unlawful assembly as well as assault. Now, this is all leading up to the general strike that is being called for, that is to kick off at 1 p.m. across various zones. Accompanying rallies are being called for in 7 districts, including Admiralty, which was ground zero for the mass marches. So this is going to be a time for Carrie Lam to come out and attempt to quiet some of the concern, because we've seen Hong Kong business confidence take a hit. Just this morning, we saw data, market PMI for Hong Kong, the whole economy, falling to the lowest level since 2009. Retail sales have been sluggish, and just last week, DBS, they downgraded their forecast for Hong Kong's GDP growth considerably, and they're warning that domestic consumption could take a further hit if these political uncertainties continue to rock sentiment for Hong Kong. Guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the latest PMI numbers, which came out just this morning, about 30 minutes ago, Sophie, as you flagged earlier, lowest level here since 10 years. Well, you were also speaking there, just to get our viewers up to date here, the Hong Kong Airport Express railing, so that's the one that takes you from the airport into the city in about 30 minutes, has now been suspended. That's according to RTHK, just to get that out there as well. Final words, let's get Sharon back in. Sharon, obviously protests simply just adding to the headaches of Chinese leadership. We have leaders, of course, gathered at Beidahe.
Yeah, so obviously in the background, there's this trade war with the U.S. that has just escalated another notch with Trump putting more tariffs on Chinese goods. We reported earlier that at the top of the agenda at Beidahe, there is the trade war, there's also the economic slowdown, and now Hong Kong. You know, all these three issues, massive dilemmas for the government, and they have to figure out what kind of action will come after. We do expect certain announcements will be made after the leaders are done with their annual retreat, although it's hard to say in what format or if it will be in some kind of structured way. We also have Tyson PMI due for services and composite numbers today at 9:45. It looks like it won't be as bad as the other numbers that we've seen so far. Services PMI forecast to be in line with the prior number of 52.
All right, Sharon, thank you so much. Sharon Chen, our Beijing Bureau Chief, and Sophie, of course, is with us out of the Hong Kong International Airport. You can also just turn to your Bloomberg Forward clients here. More on this TLIV Go. We're running a full blog today. Have a look at this. This basically takes you up to speed. Commentary, also analysis from our guys here. Here at Bloomberg News. Now, still ahead, John Flynn. So the HSBC CEO stepping down after less than 18 months on the roll. In the roll, we'll have the surprising shake-up plus the bank's latest earnings coming up.
But next, a key week for Asia, with 5 central banks in the region set to announce policy decisions. We discuss what to expect and the possible market impact. This is Bloomberg. Bloomberg Markets, China Open. It's a key week for Asia-Pacific markets with 5 central bank policy decisions that may set the tone for the rest of the year. Markets are predicting policymakers in India, the Philippines, and New Zealand will all cut rates to shore up faltering growth, while the RBA will pause after those back-to-back moves, and Thailand likely won't lower borrowing costs at all. David, what are you seeing?
Yeah, that's a bit of a conundrum there for Thailand because of where the currency is and how strong it's actually become. Let's talk about this, where we go from here market-wise. Tong Li Han is with us here in our studios, Deep Blue Global Investment CIO. Good morning, we were talking during makeup that you guys have done very well, your fund, because of your call on treasuries.
Yeah, on the safe haven and also Japanese yen.
Right, talk to us about that. Treasuries, are you still long?
Yeah, I closed my position for temporary, for technically. But strategically, I will still encourage the long-term investors to invest in the treasuries, because I think, the U.S. Treasury yield is heading all the way down to 1% for 10 years.
In terms of what other central banks around the region would do, I mean, treasuries is the most obvious trade.
Yeah.
Apart from that, is there any other trade that you would put in there?
Yeah, it's going to be the global high-yield emerging markets, whose economy were depressed in the past several years in fear of the capital outflow, given the very hawkish Fed, in the past couple of years. But right now, everything is just a turnaround, and because those high-yield emerging market economies are still suffering from the recession or depression. They will cut interest rate in the future, and then their currency will appreciate from here because it's undervalued.
Speaking of currency, so the PBOC just set the yuan fix today. For the first time this year, it's a redhead, you might have seen it, above 6.9. Dollar offshore is basically trading at the highest level since that was introduced back in 2010. Unsurprising given the moves we've seen really in the US dollar. Tong Li, do you think we'll break 7? If we break 7, how long do you think we'll stay above that, and is it a big deal?
Right. I think for the short-term market, it's very likely, But in the mid to long term, I think the PBOC will contain the dollar CNY below 7 because by depreciating its currency, China has much more to lose than to gain. If you take a look at the overall export-import volume as percentage of GDP, is only account for less than 25%. However, the domestic credit market, the overall credit accounting for over.
Actually, here we go. We just broke 7 here on dollar offshore. 703.34. This move that, okay, you know what? Let me just double check this as well because this is quite a big headline to check. Just give me a second here. So the fixing was above 7. That's the onshore fixing above 7. 7. Oh, there it is. We do have the headline, so it has weakened past this. Sorry, you were saying, just to interrupt you as well.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Yeah, but I'm talking about the mid to long term. China has more to lose than to gain because the domestic credit market is much more important, much more, 10 times more important than the total export-import market. So China want to keep the investors' confidence in onshore, and in the meanwhile, they want to keep the foreign investors' confidence to attract more capital inflow rather than the outflow.
Tong Li, Bloomberg's economists are predicting that if these tariffs do go into effect, there's going to be a further